Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Allison Lynn. I am the Vice President of Communications at the Aerospace Industries Association. Thank you for being here today. It's great to be at Sierra Space. It's my inaugural visit, and I will definitely be back. Global air and trade shows like this one demonstrate the best of what industry has to offer, provide a glimpse into the tools available to meet global threats. As we look forward to the future, AUKUS Pillar 2 has the potential to redefine trilateral cooperation by leveraging the resources and know-how that Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States has to offer. Many industry partners are excited by the possibilities of Pillar 2. There are a lot of questions remaining about how it's going to be governed, resourced, and executed. We'll get to some of those questions today. It's a really big initiative. We have an AUKUS chair at AIA. It goes, AUKUS, AUKUS. So I am privileged to be here with some of the experts that are working on Pillar 2. And we have representatives from the 3 countries with us today, and I'm going to say their names and then let them talk a little bit about their roles. First, we have Mr. Stephen Moore from Australia, Mr. Shimon Fima from the UK Ministry of Defense, Mr. Michael Vaccaro from the US State Department, and Mr. Justin McFarland from the Department of Defense. Thank you all for being here. Stephen?
For inviting me to speak. My name's Stephen Moore, First Assistant Secretary of AUKUS Advanced Capabilities in the Australian Department of Defence. It was a role that was established on the 1st of July last year, specifically to manage the way that the Australian Department of Defence thinks about AUKUS Advanced Capabilities, Pillar 2 of AUKUS in the Australian context. What that looks like is me working across our defence organisation and with our colleagues in our Department of Foreign Affairs and Prime Minister and Cabinet to both deliver the capabilities that the Australian Defence Department need, along with my colleagues in the US and the UK, but also to look at how we create that enabling environment for AUKUS Pillar 2 to flourish.
Wonderful. Shimon?
Thank you. So Shimon Fima, Director of Strategic Programs in the UK, and that has a fairly broad role. A key part of it is international capability collaboration, who we work with across the globe to ensure that we achieve in the UK, but more broadly, our strategic objectives more widely. And therefore, as part of that, AUKUS Pillar 2 as Deputy Chief AUKUS Pillar 2 in the UK. Also have an interest almost on the capability side, quite at the deep level capability side. We also have responsibility for the complex and novel weapons, so anything up to the strategic deterrent. Thank you.
Justin?
Justin McFarland, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Industry and International Engagement within ANS and DoD. And so in that capacity, manage 2 offices. One is, as it says, industry engagement. And then the other is international collaboration and partnerships. And so AUKUS is kind of the consolidation or where both of those intersect. And so within the AUKUS context, I lead U.S. industry engagement. And then I also try to keep Dr. LaPlante, the Undersecretary for ANS, apprised of all things on Pillar 1 and Pillar 2.
Mike?
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Vaccaro. I am state's new DAS for Defense Trade Controls, and many of you may have remembered me from my old job at the Department of Defense, where I worked with Justin, where I was the PDAS for Industrial-Based Policy. But in my new role, I'm the Director for Defense Trade Controls, and so we're the folks who are licensing all the direct commercial sales that you in industry are working on. And I was part of AUKUS at the beginning, even before it was publicly announced. I was Mr. Pillar 2 before there was a Pillar 2. And now I am sucked back in, if you will, in my new role at state and working the ITAR exemption. But I'm excited to be here, and it's really exciting to share this stage with some colleagues I've worked not only in the DoD side, but with the UK and Australia for some time. So it's looking forward to today's discussion.
So after the discussion, Mike will be outside with a little bit of a target behind him in case anybody wants to throw darts about ITAR. That's the guy.
I'm Mr. ITAR now. ITAR's not scary. You just got to embrace it.
Well, thank you. Let's get started with some of the questions. Stephen, Shimon, and Justin, AUKUS is the talk of town here in Washington. Lots of congressional interest, obviously, the White House, the federal agencies. But there's been a huge focus on Pillar 1. But we're going to talk about Pillar 2 today. And I'd like you to give us some context about what's going on in your own countries, what you're explaining as the strategic rationale for AUKUS in general and Pillar 2.
No, thank you. So I think certainly for the Australian government, the government recognised that we are facing some of the most uncertain strategic environments that we have for decades. and for that reason committed to getting the sorts of high-end capabilities that we knew the Australian Defence Force would need. And the Defence Strategic Review that was released, done last year in Australia and then accepted by the government, recognised that those sorts of capabilities we need to get quickly and as fast as we could into the Australian Defence Force. Advanced capabilities that Pillar 2 contemplates is certainly part of that mix. And so when AUKUS was conceived, it started obviously as looking at how Australia could get nuclear-powered submarines, but recognised that the ability to share the most exquisite technology amongst the three countries was going to be critical if we were going to get those capabilities that we needed. And so Pillar 2 grew from that and is really focused now on getting that high-end technology that we know is out there and able to make sure that all three countries have access to that.
Excellent. Shimon, how about in the UK?
So I would reflect on three key drivers for UK strategic interests in AUKUS and AUKUS Pillar 2. First one is the ever-increasing complexity of the geopolitics. The politics of geopolitics are more challenging than they ever have been. The second is the pace of technological advancement. We know, if we look over the decade, the pace of change in technology means it is ever more difficult to be able to go it alone. And I'd reflect on the third one. The world used to be a really big place. The realities are with capabilities that are there, that our adversaries have and others have. Being able to work together to ensure that we can see this world as a small place is really important. Those are probably three key drivers for us.
Great. Justin, some thoughts?
Sure. I think for the U.S., it's really about maintaining peace and security within the Indo-Pacific and doing it through two ways in AUKUS. And I'm going to steal. It was a conversation yesterday that one of my Australian colleagues, I think, described it pretty well as a Venn diagram within a circle. So humor me here for a second. But if you think of a Venn diagram with three circles representing the three countries, the advanced capabilities that we really want to deliver are at the intersection of those three kind of national interests. But outside of those three circles is a broader circle, and that's the enabling environment. So AUKUS is not just trying to deliver specific capabilities to the warfighter, but also trying to develop this enabling environment to allow our industrial bases and our companies and our industries to collaborate more closely and truly reflect the partnership that our nations have.
Thank you very much. I've learned something my 5 years in industry, and it's clear demand signals are very important for the companies that will ultimately be partners here. And I think they're keen to understand what success looks like from each country's perspective. Would our friends from the United States like to comment on that?
Sure. If anyone ever hears Dr. LaPlante speak, the Undersecretary for A&S, you'll recognize the words that I'm saying, because it's, I think, the same thing that we talk about quite a bit, and that's delivering advanced capabilities to the warfighter at speed and at scale. And that's really what right looks like. In addition, as I mentioned, that collaboration in that environment, making sure that foundation and that ecosystem is there in order to have that delivery is equally as important.
Yeah, and just to build upon what Justin said, I think from the State Department's perspective, we're all about promoting that ecosystem where innovation is there, but we also want to make sure that we're protecting our three governments and our industries' intellectual property and maintaining stringent export controls to make sure our adversaries don't reap the benefits of what we're promoting, and that's really critical too.
Ramon, how about you?
So I think, Justin, you summarized it well. Capability to the warfighter to pace of relevance. I'd say a couple of things just in addition to that. If you look at the conflicts of today, we want to see what is challenging. We see, therefore, what is important to us. I'd say interoperability. Our ability to work together is really critical, but it's really difficult. The second, and equally relevant to the conflicts of today, is resilience. Talk about resilience, but actually resilience is really difficult. We know when a conflict starts, our confidence in our resilience is actually really challenging. And the third one is, I think, summed up in what Justin mentioned, is technological edge. Getting that edge is really important. And therefore, capability that delivers that is our core focus.
I would just echo what my colleague said. It has to be about capability. Success looks like our defence forces having that high-end technology when they need it, which has to be as soon as possible. But that that comes from the close partnerships that we already have, but are strengthening through AUKUS, and demonstrating that we have that ability to share technology easily.
Mike, I'm going to pick on you because you're a Boston Red Sox fan, and I'm going to give you the ITAR question.
Wearing Red Sox cufflinks today too. So.
That everyone, I'm sure, is very interested to hear the answer to. It was obviously a big win for AUKUS. What challenges to implementation are you planning to tackle next?
Yeah, so I'll say that I'll start with my original AUKUS story. Again, I was involved in AUKUS before it became publicly announced. It's actually ruined one of my summer vacations because I couldn't go. At the time, my acting undersecretary called me into the office and said, "Hey, Mike, we're going to send you this meeting. You're going to be briefed on this new initiative with the UK and Australia. And you're an armaments cooperation guy and a defense industrial base guy. This is going to be the pinnacle of your armaments cooperation and defense industrial base cooperation experience career." And I think he's right. So I think really what we're facing right now is a generational opportunity. And I look at export controls as not inhibitors, but enablers, right? We want to be able, because what we're talking about, what I license every day are items that provide a critical military or intelligence advantage. And likewise, my partners in UK and Australia. But we recognize that in this special knit, in this ecosystem, if we need to be able to reduce inhibitors, if you will, to promote greater cooperation. And Congress gave us really unique authorities and a task in the NDAA. So I think most people in the room know, but we were tasked to put together and report to Congress within 120 days of enactment of the legislation, an assessment of the comparability of the UK and Australian export control systems with ours, and make a determination if they were comparable. Likewise, we had to determine whether or not both partners have systems in place to implement ITAR exemptions equivalent to us at the same time. So I will say that I'm also a veteran of export control reform from my times at Commerce. And when the people in the room who remember export control reform from a decade ago, we spent months, if not years, trying to tackle specific categories to find the way to properly articulate it on the USML, and then what we can move corresponding controls on the Commerce controllers. We're basically compressing what we took years to do in the Obama administration into a matter of months, in a short few. So I want to say that from a U.S. government standpoint, there's been amazing cooperation on our side in looking at, doing an analysis of our partners' export control systems for the comparability assessment, but also looking simultaneously how we would build regulations that would implement such an ITAR exemption on our side. And that includes looking at which technologies we may not want to be eligible, either because of legal requirements or whatnot. And so we spent an incredible amount of time with the interagency, DoD, state, energy, commerce, the National Security Council, but also great partnership with our UK and Australian partners to look at as we were developing our rule, but also talking about how they would implement such an exemption on their sides also. One key takeaway that I had from export control reform, and that both partners have also acknowledged is critical, is getting industry input into the process. The last thing we want to do is build something and nobody uses it. I will say that maybe one of the reasons the treaties underperformed was because they didn't have that industry input early on. So we are committed to publish a proposed rule showing how we would implement it. And we expect our partners in Australia and the UK to do something similar at the same time. So industry is going to have an opportunity to look at how the three systems would work together. So I can elaborate more as we go on for the discussion, but really right now we're looking, I can't tell when it will be, but it will be soon. But we really are looking forward to feedback from industry And when I say industry, I don't just mean US industry, I also mean Australian industry, the United Kingdom industry, how this system works. Because again, you guys would be the ultimate beneficiary of it. And the other thing too, it's not going to be limited to just the scope of AUKUS projects. It's trilateral trade between our three countries, not limited to AUKUS projects. And our goal is to make it as simple and easy to understand for industry to take advantage of this new exemption when it becomes available.
Thanks. Justin, did you want to add something to that?
I would say, the other thing that we're looking at, and so I sit within ANS, is the acquisition elements related to AUKUS. So about a couple weeks ago, we had our first acquisition tabletop exercise to look at our 3 acquisition systems and processes and understand how we can harmonize them. And it was a really good exercise because it uncovered a lot of issues that we'll have to, kind of peel back the onion and navigate and resolve. But the fact that we're doing it now ahead of need to make sure that once we have something that we really want to push into the process, that we're able to kind of press the go button and execute is important. So I think that's the other thing that we're really going to be tackling is that acquisition system.
Great. Let's turn to the Innovation Challenge. Stephen, Shimon, and Justin, how has initiatives like the Innovation Challenge and the forum, the industry forum, been received by industry? What are you hearing from your partners in the industrial base? Stephen, you want to go first?
Sure, and I you have a room full of industry here who I'm sure will judge me on my answer, but we are the first steps of engaging industry properly on Pillar 2. The Innovation Challenge went out a couple of weeks ago, and already beginning to hear feedback how that was great, but wanting to see a bit more regular drumbeat of challenges that might go out in the future, and certainly we've heard that. But I think the initial reaction was this industry has been waiting to see this, and has been good, and has given industry, in this case, an opportunity to get involved in how we are looking at electronic warfare. We need to do more. We recognise that the more engagement with industry, the better, and we'll continue to look for ways that we can do that.
Great. Shimon?
So I too am cautious to really give a reflection on this at this stage. It's just a little bit too early, particularly in the Innovation Challenge. I think there's an absolute recognition that it's a good start. But even in conversations that we've had, the positives of it, we're also learning lessons along the way across a number of areas of how we can do it, how we can do more of this, and how we can do it better. So for us, this is part of a learning journey, equally on the industry forum. I think we have been some really good work on it, but there's definitely more to do. And I reflected on a previous occasion last night, that for me, and I think for all of us, AUKUS is a strategic partnership, and a strategic partnership that is meant to be enduring. And therefore, the intent is that not that we don't expect to get it right or perfect on the first occasion, but what we will do is try to take some steps and learn along the way and hopefully do better. And that's really the focus for us. It isn't perfect. I think it's positive. The positives on the industry forum, the positives on the Innovation Challenge is definitely welcomed, but it's really the first step of a journey that will hopefully continue for some time.
Justin, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, if I can build off of what Shimon mentioned, we didn't want perfect to be the enemy of good. There was a very much an understanding trilaterally that there was definitely more that we could do to tweak the Innovation Challenge and improve it before release. But we could spend 2 years just iterating on it and churning on it without actually getting it out there. And so the decision was made, we just needed to do it and figure out, where the issues are, what are the lessons that we can learn after we get responses and feedback from industry and from participants. So I think it was an exciting thing to get out the door, and we're looking forward to, as mentioned, learning from it. I will touch very briefly, because I think we keep mentioning the industry forum, but I don't think we've actually talked about what it is and when it happened and things of that nature. So this morning was the first inaugural meeting of the AUKUS Industry Forum. And what that is really, we're trying to formalize some of the trilateral engagement that we're having with trilateral industry. The challenge is there's a lot of companies and a lot of you are interested. And so the way that we're really doing this is through the industry associations. And so each nation has 4 industry associations that participate, and we all kind of get together and talk through some of the issues that we're seeing on both sides and how we can better partner and work together to navigate some of them. We had our first conversation this morning. I think it was very productive. I know there's some folks in the audience that were there, and so I look forward to hearing your feedback. But I think it was a good first start, because I like to say when I'm on these panels, there's no manufacturing facility in the basement of the Pentagon. We are not making anything in my office, and it's really all of you out in the crowd and in the audience that are going to enable us to actually deliver something. And so we have to partner, we have to communicate, we have to collaborate in order to actually deliver anything to the warfighter. And this was a good first step in that journey.
So just to build on that, do you anticipate that there will be more iterative forums like that? We have a Farm Bureau coming up, Avalon next year.
No,
more of that
I think
conversation?
I think the plan is for us to continue meeting formally at these kind of global trade shows, so to speak. But then it's not going to be just those engagements, because again, it requires deep partnership. And so while we will definitely be engaging with the industry associations in between those meetings virtually and meeting in person at the trade shows, at a national level, I think we're also going to be needing to do more engagement. I think that's what we're thinking about right now is how and when to do that. There's a huge demand for more information and clarity and strong interest, and we don't want to let that die and fizzle by not providing any information to industry. So we're working through that right now and figuring out how and when are the best times to have those conversations, not just trilaterally, but also nationally.
Great. I'm a voracious reader. Obviously, I do communications for a living. I see some of my reporter friends here in the audience, and obviously AUKUS has been covered from an American perspective in the US media. I'm really interested to hear how the reaction has been in Australia, the public perception of AUKUS, and the same for the UK. I think that's important context for our audience to understand that there are different imperatives for different countries, because we don't read as much about that. My Daily Mail consumption is really just about the royals.
You want to follow on from the Royals and the Daily Mail?
Royals, that's right.
Compete with that.
Definitely. I think what I can say is that AUKUS doesn't necessarily generate as much excitement and interest as the stories around the royals.
For good reason.
For good reasons. But I think that's really important. The reality is that in the world that we are in, most of the UK don't wake up each day and think, how is AUKUS going? They also don't wake up each day and think, how is the defence of the UK or the right global order going? But I think what is changing is the perceptions of defence. Defence historically has been an area that has not been on the forefront of individuals' mind, but that is absolutely changing. The threats and the realities of the world are pretty close. I think the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has made this really relevant and made it clear to everybody that defence isn't something that the state needs to worry about. It's something that we all need to care about, and all of us need to consider properly. I think from an AUKUS perspective, when there are key issues, as happened on Monday, that definitely does make the press. And I think that is a recognition of how significant defence has become, and therefore thinking beyond their geographical boundaries in the UK is important, because that recognition that the world is a small place is definitely more relevant. So the fact that AUKUS makes the headlines in each of our papers when there is a story to be told is important. But I'd also reflect on, that's probably not who we want to think about, but I think politically and those from a defence perspective, if I reflect on that from a domestic perspective, the importance of defence is absolutely recognised. The importance of strategic partnerships is absolutely recognised. And the reality that there are those who are non-aligned, and that poses a challenge for relationships and for the world order, is something that is more relevant today than it ever has been. So for those who make decisions and for those for whom it is important to maintain the security of the UK and more widely the right global order, is absolutely of interest and of note.
Stephen, how about you?
And I think in Australia, and there may be a bit of selection bias here because I do tend to read the media on AUKUS, but I think it is front of mind in a way perhaps that it's not quite as much in the US or the UK. There is a lot of reporting on both pillars 1 and 2 in Australia. I think that's a good thing. It's generally accepted as something that is important for the country. Mike used the phrase a generational opportunity earlier. I think that is true. And it's perceived in Australia as the case, that AUKUS will deliver for Australia groundbreaking necessary capabilities that we're going to need, both the nuclear-powered submarine, but also the opportunities to really grab those technologies and use them to the benefit of our defence forces.
Mike, we're going to move back into rules and regulations and implementation. I'm sure your favorite subject. Can you shed some light on where the State Department is in drafting the entire rules and regulations?
So as I mentioned before, this is really it's one of the State Department's top priorities. Like I said, I can't get away from AUKUS even to change jobs. So, Congress, I'll say AUKUS is one of the areas where there's strong bipartisan support. And I spent 3 or 4 hours yesterday up on the Hill chatting with staffers, missed the eclipse because we were having AUKUS discussions. And again, where are we? And so, as I mentioned earlier, the NDA gave us a challenge that we have to report to Congress on our analysis of the comparability assessment between our systems and the UK and Australia in 120 days. So that's roughly April 19th. And if we don't make a positive certification at that time, we're continuing the cycle every 120 days. So we have not delivered the certification package to the Hill yet, because it's not April 19th yet. But again, as I mentioned earlier, all 3 governments have recognized the critical importance of getting feedback from industry, lessons learned from the treaty, positive lessons learned from export control reform. Your input is critical, because if you guys don't embrace what we are proposing, if you're not using it, we have failed in our mission. And we don't want to do that, because again, we think this will be critical to helping foster the environment where not only the big defense prime contractors, but the small and medium-sized enterprises, the research institutions, academia who are involved in military technology can all work together to help develop that next generation of capabilities that we want all 3 of our warfighters to get. So that's where we are in that. I will say that, again, coming soon, you will have an opportunity to look at a proposed rule for the U.S. side. And when that opportunity emerges, I really encourage everyone to provide feedback either through associations or individually. We want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure it's fit for purpose for your intent. And we also want to make sure we try to devise something that is easy to understand and much less burdensome than the treaties to implement on your side. That's our goal. And if we've hit the mark, please tell us that. If there are areas we can improve upon once you see it, let us know. But again, I think that we also recognize the importance of starting someplace and building upon that. And so my hope is that this will be the starting point. But again, we look forward to getting industry input, because again, you are the critical stakeholders in the process.
Great. Collaboration across the 3 industrial bases will provide institutional benefits beyond trilateral partnership. What impact will AUKUS have on building industrial resiliency more broadly? Let's start with Stephen, then go to Shimon, Justin, and Mike.
Well, that's, really, when we talk about the enabling environment that AUKUS is looking to deliver, really that is one of the byproducts that we are really hoping that some of the regulatory changes that we're talking about, but also some of the driving forces around the capabilities we need will get at. Looking at how we can build resilience in our industrial bases through working closely with friends, building resilience into supply chains, understanding how by freeing up the ability to share technology, we're able to allow our industrial bases to collaborate more effectively and to look for benefits in building those stronger supply chains that we are looking for and that we know we're going to need. And so I think, yes, while the focus must be on delivering capability to defence forces, I think in trying to achieve that, what we're also doing is by default establishing an industrial base amongst the 3 countries that will make sure we have that resilience we're looking for.
Ron?
So I reflect on, there are certain areas of capability where it is really clear that no individual nation has the resilience that it needs to address the threats that are coming upon us in the future. And therefore that provides a really big opportunity for us to ensure that when we invest and where we invest, it's something that ideally either we ensure that we complement or we deconflict. And that is really important because there is a real risk that we duplicate. So therefore, to complement and to deconflict, I think is really significant in what we do. And we need to, that is, in my mind, one of the areas that we are getting better at. But there are areas where I think there will be an element of industrial resilience. But as my boss, General McGowan, often reflects to others, he says, I'm waiting for the day when the problem in AUKUS Pillar 2 is really that escalation and that creating that additional resilience that we need. At the moment, we are building those capabilities. We are focusing on working on those areas that will give us advantage. And hopefully, in the near future, it's about taking them and giving us the resilience. I don't think it is the problem of today, but we absolutely need to prepare today to ensure that we are ready for when those challenges come upon us, hopefully soon.
And I think one thing that I would add, while it's not necessarily a part of AUKUS, formally quote unquote, Defense Production Act, Title I, or Title III rather. We recently received authorization to include the UK and Australia and consider them for DPA funding, which I think from a supply chain resiliency perspective is very, very huge help. There's definitely capabilities and technologies and capacity within the two countries that we would like to leverage to address some of our own needs. And so being able to, just like Canada, make those investments in Australia and the UK and have those companies eligible for DPA funding is going to be a huge help.
Yeah, and also just to build upon what Justin said, and Justin's team recently released a National Defense Industrial Strategy, the first time the Department of Defense has ever done one of these in modern times that we can remember. But there's one chapter in there about allies and partners, and it highlights the importance of leveraging each other's industrial bases, the importance of production and diplomacy, and not necessarily just talking for end items, but components, subsystems, whatnot. And I think that we recognize the more resiliency, the more capabilities that are around the world. Obviously, there's a long way to go to Australia and whatnot. And if you're in a contentious logistics environment, to have capabilities downrange obviously is a huge benefit. And that's something the State Department is talking a lot about on production diplomacy, the importance of that. And my team is heavily involved, or the Paul Mill Bureau at State is heavily involved working with Justin's teams in the interagency and fleshing out more what we're doing in allies and partners in that regard.
Yeah, so not to dominate, but to build off what Mike said now, I think one of the things, when people think about Pillar 2, they're really thinking, in their minds, more around, R&D and cooperative, collaborative research and development. And then the pull through to get that into acquisition and procurement. And then it kind of, their thinking probably stops. But I think what we're thinking about is the entirety of the life cycle. So after that acquisition and procurement, co-sustainment. So it's co-development, co-production, and then co-sustainment. I think that's where a lot of that resiliency is really going to be.
So let's move along and talk a little bit about the experience of the UK-Australia Defence Trade Treaties and how that experiment and that experience is being used to inform the implementation of the ITAR exemption.
Yeah, obviously, I think that if you look at the volume of trade that is conducted underneath the treaties, it's not a significant amount. And also just the users eligible for that. I mean, one of the things about the treaty is it was basically focused on government programs cooperation. As we're looking at the exemption for our three countries, the scope's going to be much broader. And again, we're looking to ensure that the system that we develop between our three systems, our three countries, is easy for industry to use, not extremely burdensome, but at the same time gives us all three countries confidence that the items are going where they're supposed to go. And so, again, I think that one of the lessons learned from the treaties were that we really didn't solicit industry input early enough in the process. Now, some of the treaties may have been, the benefits of the treaties may have been overcome by events with export control reform and moving the less sensitive military items to commerce's control where they're eligible for license exceptions and whatnot. And that's what I was licensing when I was at Commerce. But I will say that, as we're looking, what's influencing me right now is my export control reform experience and knowing that getting industry input helped us make sure we develop sound rules that were implementable by industry and could be complied with, and at the same time were a benefit. Because again, I'll sound like a broken record, but the worst thing we could do is build a system that nobody uses. That would be a failure for all three of our governments. It would be a failure to all three of industries. Our goal is, this is a generational shift here, right? We want to create this environment, this ecosystem where our industries can collaborate together, and we have confidence that the information data is still protected. And I think we'll get there. But again, industry is going to play a critical role, and so please take advantage of the opportunity when it's given to you.
Obviously, the exemption is key to implementation. However, the concept of comparable systems remains a barrier. Earlier this month, Australia fast-tracked some legislation to reform its export control system. So, Stephen, talk to us a little bit about that. That's a huge change for you all. Can you give us a flavor of how that's being received in Australia, and what does your regime attempt to achieve?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that. And Mike, you used the phrase generational opportunity again. I've got the same talking point. Either people are writing us on points, or it is in fact a generational opportunity.
Did you ever say S or a C on it when you
But yes, we've made changes in our own legislation to recognise the importance of creating a strong environment that allows that free flow of technology, but has the assurances that it will be protected as it moves between the US and Australia. And those changes, I think, have been quite well received. The team that's done that, Kylie Wright, I think, is in the audience, and I'll direct all questions to her. But her and her team have done a fantastic job of outreach to both industry and academia in Australia to help understand the implications of that change and what it means for Australian industry. I think by and large that's been positive and well received, especially as it's been understood about what that will mean for industry. Certainly now I think the proof will be in the pudding, and we'll need to make sure it's implemented in a way that is effective. But I think it has been recognised as really giving that generational change to the way that we work with the US.
Great. Shimon, are there any systematic changes under consideration in the UK to ensure its export control system is deemed comparable?
So there's been a huge amount of work in this area in terms of discussions with the US and Australia. I think from a UK perspective, when our legal experts have looked at it and certainly the discussions that we've had, systematic change isn't one that is legislative, it's one that I think is cultural. We are confident that with the very limited exemptions that we provide to, or let's start with the fact that we have open general export licenses, and there are very few things that cannot be addressed through that we are confident that we can ensure that level playing field. We're going to test it. I think we're going to test it in terms of between our nations. But I think the key thing is to test it with industry. Because actually we can all feel confident amongst ourselves that it is simple enough, easy enough, effective enough. But actually, if it doesn't facilitate activity that allows us to move quicker, share what we want to share, and deliver the advantage that we want to deliver, then we would have failed. Even if we're all confident that the systems that are in place give us what we need, it's not just how we deem it to operate, it's how yourselves and industry feel it will operate in practice. And that's the bit that we really need to do, to run it through. And I said it in a different form earlier today, I think the cultural change is going to be really significant. That recognition that within each of our countries, that we're willing to take a little bit more risk as individuals in terms of saying this is okay, this complies, is going to be as important as anything else that we do.
Yeah, and I'd like just to say that this whole experience for the first 120 days has been a great partnership between all three of our countries. All the questions, we've set up a trilateral working group where we discuss things, a lot of bilateral discussions, And as Steve highlighted, the two pieces of legislation that Australia really expedited, it was even ahead of schedule when they passed those. And Shimon's UK passed new law and enacted it in December. We've sort of been, the day-to-day updates of what's going on has been critical to help keep us informed so we can finalize our determination certification package.
Let's return to the Innovation Challenge for a few minutes. Obviously, earlier this month, three countries announced the first of its kind Innovation Challenge by leveraging ACSA, ASC, and DIU. Obviously, industry is very excited about it, but we also rely on requirements and funding to invest in capability development. We understand this will be the first in a series of challenges. So for all of you, how has the rollout been and what has the reaction from industry been?
As Justin said earlier, we didn't want to spend years creating the perfect system for the innovation challenges, only to sort of have industry lose interest in the intervening period. I expect that we will get better at these. I think the first one has been quite good and quite well received. It has been put out by the same innovation challenge by our three national innovation systems, and they will collect those responses and look at them collectively. What I think we would like to see is refining those a bit so that we encourage collaboration and work our systems better so that we have a more streamlined innovation process across the three. But as a first attempt, I think it's been pretty well received, and we will continue to refine those as we go.
Certainly made news in Washington, D.C. Shimon?
So I'd start by saying, actually, as part of the Innovation Challenge, it's the warfighter that hopefully will be the winner over here. And this is really important because within defense, we don't normally move as quickly as we do. And the ambition over here was to move very quick and see what we can deliver to the warfighter at a pace that they will find is transformational. And therefore, from an industry perspective, the feedback that we've had is that it's absolutely been welcome. But perhaps in our drive to get that pace in, we've actually given some really tight timelines to industry to turn things around. And that's an important lesson for us as to how we think about each of the considerations around this. I think the comms around it were good, but I'll also be really candid that the comms around it could have been more effective. Actually, there's a strategic outcome that we want to land when we talk about how we operate in this way. So I think we all agree this is the first one. There will be many others along the way, and each one will give us, will help us and inform us as to what we do differently and better. But certainly the feedback is that it's positive and welcome, but also we shouldn't underestimate, and this is really important, this is hard work. Actually, you would think getting out a single innovation challenge to our own industries, to our own mechanisms, would be quite simple. It's hard, and that is along the way what we are learning, and it's actually what will allow us to do things quite radically different as we go with bigger challenges to industry and ones that we look to give us some even greater advantage.
And I know some high caliber comms people. If you need assistance with the next challenge, just let me know.
Thank you.
Justin?
I agree with everything that they said, and just building upon that, I think we got. I think as soon as it got released, I started getting feedback, and so it's been very, very helpful and insightful to hear how it landed at companies, how it was received, what their immediate reactions were. And very helpful in helping us think through what the future iteration should look like and the future rollout. I mean, some of the things that we've heard, we talk about the exempted technologies list and ITAR. How does that impact the responses? It's not something that we necessarily thought about when we made that release, but what assumptions do companies have to make about the technology that they're including in those responses? So that's the type of feedback that was really valuable for us to hear as soon as this came out the gate, that we can incorporate into the future challenges. And I think, as Shimon mentioned, timing and ensuring that we provide ample time for industry to respond to the challenges. And they let us know if we have a little bit more warning, we don't have to have the challenge itself in the challenge statement, but if we know in general what the topic might be in advance, then that helps us just get the juices going in our response, and that way we can get better responses. So I think those are some of the nuggets that we've already gathered over the past, I'd say, 2 weeks from conversations. And we look forward to including all of that into kind of the future challenges.
Mike, do you have any thoughts?
No, just to build upon what Justin said, I think one of the things to realize is, we're almost building the bridges we're driving over here to a certain extent, but we're taking notes, right? And so we're gonna, and each time we build another bridge, we're gonna build it better. So again, and your role as industry is critical to that. So if you got suggestions how we should be improving either export controls or other aspects of the system, let us know.
So we talk a lot about non-traditional companies in the United States and the role that they can play in the defense ecosystem, which is pretty sophisticated, I'm sure, in all 3 countries. Stephen, from your perspective, or anyone is welcome to jump in, how do you think this challenge can help attract those non-traditional players into the AUKUS ecosystem?
It will be critical, I think, to get companies that haven't traditionally worked with defence interested in the sorts of problems that defence forces face, and getting them thinking about how they may bring their own strengths to bear on getting us the capabilities that we need. I think the idea behind innovation challenges to give problem statements that are broad enough that allow companies to see themselves in it somehow, and making sure that we do communicate them in a way that they do get out to companies that aren't traditionally or haven't traditionally thought about defence as a customer for them. One of the things that we need to make sure we do is do that in a way that makes working with defence enticing and reduces some of the barriers that have traditionally existed in defence procurement. And part of what AUKUS is trying to do is get at that as well. But it's going to be critical if a lot of the technologies that we are looking at reside in companies that haven't traditionally worked in defence.
So all hands on deck is sort of the approach.
Exactly.
Anybody want to add anything to that?
Well, I'll just say, just even in the export control world, I mean, we've spent a lot of priority in my organization the last couple of years doing outreach to the universities, right? So there's the incubators there. So one, that they understand the importance of protecting technology, but also understand the rules and regulations. And that's going to be really critical, I think, because I do agree. I think that those non-traditionals are going to be key. They're a source of innovation, right? Those are the people who are doing this. And as we do outreach, once we publish the proposed rule, I think it's really going to be critical that we get some input. One, make them aware of the changes, but also get their input too.
Great. Based on recent announcements, it looks like undersea surveillance and electronic warfare capabilities have emerged as top pillars. I know you all probably don't want to go into what else as part of Pillar 2. Don't want to go into any other specifics beyond that. But how do you work together to determine what capabilities should be in that mix?
Sure, I'll take the first hack at that. I think number one, it has to have some type of relevance to all 3 nations. And it has to be relevant in the Indo-Pacific kind of region and context. Again, our focus is maintaining this peace and stability within that region. But then I think it also has to add value. The trilateral participation and making this trilaterally has to make sense and add value somehow. We talk about the AUKUS difference. And so as we look at new opportunities, we're very focused on what is that AUKUS difference that's going to cause this to be better trilateral than if it's just bilateral or one country doing it alone. Is it cost? Is it better capabilities? Whatever that is, identifying that AUKUS difference is really going to be important.
So if I go next, I think it has to be, each capability has to be strategic. I know it's a term that we use and overuse, but it's really significant. We are talking about 3 partners who span the globe, and therefore thinking about the capabilities that we invest in, it has to be something that will maintain the strategic balance of security in the Indo-Pacific. And that's not a small hurdle to think about. So that means it's got to be strategic and significant. I think it also needs to level up. What I mean by that is I'm really quite passionate that it will be, the reality is that within the AUKUS partnership, each of our nations will have strengths that are over and above that of the other nation. AUKUS and each capability has to ensure that it facilitates and allows for leveling up. Because if it doesn't do that, then I don't think it's suited for AUKUS. I think, as Justin said, it's really important that we've got to be better together. Therefore, the sum of our parts has to be far greater than us working on it individually. And that's not easy. And therefore, we will be selective in what we take for. We're selective because to meet all of those areas actually means it's quite a high bar. But we've got to be selective because the reality is we all spend a lot of time on many things. The day jobs are really busy. The threats are out there are really busy. And therefore, we've got to focus on times on those areas that will make a real difference. And those are the 3 areas in particular that we consider when we think about what is suitable for AUKUS Pillar 2.
The only thing I would add is as we look at the sorts of technologies and capabilities that are out there, making sure that we see a clear operational customer for them, that they're driven by warfighter needs, and that we can move them from the innovative sandbox into the hands of warfighters is critical. Without that, it's nothing more than a science experiment.
Well, when we were putting these questions together, I reminded our guests that I do communications for a living, as we've discussed, that I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that have been in the news to make it more relevant to the audience. And you all have been so successful already. There's talk about expanding AUKUS. Sounds like you're doing a lot of work just getting this in place and collaborating with industry. But do you see AUKUS as a model for agreements with other partners and allies in the future? Are there things you could take away from this that you think, Mike keeps talking about generational change? I don't disagree. I think that's really exciting and aspirational. So what are your thoughts on using this as a model moving forward?
So if I go first, I'm going to say that our comms clearly failed, because if the message that is out there on expanding AUKUS, then the wordsmithing that went on to the nth degree clearly did not achieve its effect, because we were quite precise in the wording of specific projects within AUKUS. So clearly that comms expertise we could do with. But I think our leaders said some time ago that AUKUS Pillar 2 is not an exclusive club, and it absolutely shouldn't be. And therefore, as we progress and as we deliver AUKUS Pillar 2 and hopefully achieve some successes, it will be absolutely right to think, how do we take those 3 areas that we spoke about, that I mentioned earlier, and ensure that we can augment them in other areas of capability that are specific to particular areas of capability rather than generic expansion of AUKUS. So this is enduring. This is, as we said, it's not a 2-3 year activity. And therefore, I wouldn't want to say 5 years, 10 years, 20 years time, what does it look like? I think for today, it's around achieving the success of today. How do we do well with what we've got? I think we've seen the first forays into expanding it for particular projects. But I think the reality is that we'll go at the pace where we can actually ensure that we're still maintaining success and try and build on the success rather than expansion before we've actually been able to walk.
Walk, crawl, run.
I would just echo what Shimon says. I think Pillar 1 was always considered it would just be the 3 countries. Nuclear powered submarines was always going to be an exclusive set. But Pillar 2 was envisaged from the start that it may incorporate partners, and I think you are seeing now the beginning of what that might look like. Our Minister said that we would start discussions with Japan on how we might be able to cooperate on particular projects with Japan, and we'll see where that takes us.
Great. U.S. friends have any thoughts?
No. I think they covered it. I think they really did cover it. I think, as they said, our leaders have very clearly stated from the get-go that it was never meant to be an exclusive club on the Pillar 2 side, and that we are open to adding additional partners. And as Japan was announced and beginning some of those conversations, adding partners on specific projects. I think that we're looking forward to having those conversations and moving out on that.
And I'll just say on the ITAR exemption, I'm focused on having success at 3 right now. But that being said, that my team, we do have other forums where we're talking with partners on how to strengthen defense trade controls and cooperation and pursue trade efficiencies. So we're always open to having bilateral dialogues with other countries on export controls.
I've spent some time with your teams and you all, and I've been really impressed with how collaborative you are, your knowledge, obviously, and how enthusiastic you are. This is a big deal. Generational, as Mike says. What can this group expect moving forward? What's the next iteration of what happens with implementation and innovation challenges and the like? But you had a crystal ball.
I mean, a lot of the work, the things that we've already mentioned, we're going to continue pushing out on those innovation challenges, industry engagement, the industry forum. But I think one of the things that excites me the most, so far, AUKUS has been very kind of top down. What we're starting to see now is bottom up. And the most recent example of this was our service chiefs, Army service chiefs, all putting out a joint statement about the areas where they want to collaborate. I think that's what makes it exciting, is the recognition now deeper into our organizations that there's a lot of goodness in partnering and leveraging AUKUS to partner and as Shimon said, level up everyone. And so for that to happen organically on its own without leadership saying, hey, you must do this or you shall do this is what makes it most exciting for me. And I'm looking forward to seeing more and more of that happen as we move forward.
Huh?
So to use a slightly different word, but exactly the same as Justin's point, I think greater partnership. I think that exactly that is greater partnership. How do we do this as a partnership? It's really important that we don't reflect and say government has all the answers. We may have a better insight of the threat, but we absolutely don't have all the answers. And therefore, that partnership with industry reflecting on how you can tell us how we can get that strategic advantage that we want to get is absolutely critical. And I think we see a lot at the moment in terms of top-down, what are your problems? What do you want to work on? That's important, and we need to get better at that. What I want to see more of is also those reflections. These are the opportunities. This is the world as you see it, because you're well connected. You see the threats. What are your suggestions for taking it forward? I think what we absolutely will see, and it's fundamentally important, is those reduced barriers for countries, for companies operating in each of our countries to be able to talk amongst each other. When I go to conferences and people say to me, we'd really love to tell you about this opportunity that will give you that strategic advantage, but I'm worried about the implications of doing so. Getting through those barriers are fundamentally important because it should give us far greater capability. It means the intellectual capacity of all of our industries can develop far more quickly and far more effectively by ensuring that we can share things amongst our nations. And I genuinely hope that what in turn that leads to is quicker delivery and more iterative delivery. If we don't do that, then we failed, because iterative delivery is going to be fundamental to how we operate going forward. So those are the three things I think what industry can expect, but also hopefully what we expect in terms of this partnership with industry.
Give you the last word.
Thank you. And look, I will I think I repeated a little what Justin and Shimon said, but I think what you will see is further opportunities for industry to engage with AUKUS, both in providing that feedback on how we are going and where we might be able to head next, both in technology and in reducing some of those barriers that exist between the three countries, but also greater clarity in what our operational requirements are, not only to allow industry to respond to those, but also to invite solutions from those that we may not normally talk to.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to our panel. You were wonderful. I learned quite a bit, and I didn't even mess up the name ITAR, so I'm winning today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your event.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.